Welcome to Drinking Bros, presented by GhostBed.com.
Welcome to Drinkin Bros, kids. Got Officer John Mattingly on the show today. His book is out now, 12 Seconds in the Dark, a police officer's firsthand account of the Breonna Taylor raid. If you've heard his name in public before, it is because he was one of the officers shot in the raid of Breonna Taylor. We appreciate you joining us today. Where are you, by the way?
Right now I'm in Iowa at a truck stop, so we'll see how this goes.
Well,
I might get some sound or people walking by, but we'll see how it does.
If you just shuffle your foot underneath the stall, that lets people know you want your dicks.
We should make a fucking T-shirt
that.
that just says "wide stance," because Don Mattingly also had a wide stance.
He sure did.
Hey,
he sure did for the New York Yankees.
Yeah.
Beloved Yankee and manager. Welcome. We had one of the guys from Louisville Police Department on, Dexter Pitts, on the show. And he was chatting about your case a little bit. It's nice to have you on. First and foremost, I want to tell everybody that the Daily Wire is actually your publisher on this book. I didn't know they publish books.
Well, I'm the very first one, actually.
Are you really?
Yeah. They just launched this in the spring of this year, and they've got another one coming out right now. But yeah, it was the first book out of the gate, so it was an honor to, be able to do that for them.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm sure this case has turned your life upside down, which is why you wrote this book, to get your story straight. Tell me a little bit about the process behind this book and how you were able to get it out so quickly.
Well, actually, it was ready to go last year. I wrote the transcript or the manuscript and turned it in last April, so almost a year ago. And they sent it off, and that's when it was through Post Hill Press. Mm-hmm. And Simon & Schuster caught wind of it, or they knew about it, but the outrage woke public caught wind of it, and they started lambasting them and harassing them, and they threatened Post Hill Press. They said they were going to burn their building down. They doxed their employees, and it was just it was a nightmare. And so since there was no way to distribute the book, we had to start looking for somebody else to take it. And Daily Wire was, kind enough to do that. And so people say, man, did you ever ghostwrite it? And I'm like, well, read the book and you'll see I'm no Ernest Hemingway. So no, I didn't have a ghostwriter. I wrote it all myself. I'd wait for my wife and kid to go to bed at night, and I would just sit down and just tell my story, what I went through and what my family went through and what our police department went through. And so it made it pretty easy.
Why is it so important for you to tell this story?
Well, I just need the public to hear the truth. So this thing's gone on for 2 years now. And our police department, our city, our mayor, they have not refuted one of the lies, one of the misinformation, the distruths that have been put out there. They've not once come back and said, hey, that's not true. That never happened that way. You had everything. We'll go through them real quick. Some of just the basic ones that everybody knows about. Mm-hmm. People said Breonna was asleep in her bed. Not true. She was awake. She was in the hallway with Kenneth Walker. They said we had the wrong house. I mean, that was a huge thing for a long time. Mm-hmm. And until the search warrant got leaked by someone, I'm not even sure who did it, but someone on the inside was tired of hearing the negative. And Breonna Taylor's name's on the warrant. Her house is on the warrant. Her vehicle's on the warrant. So we had the right house.
Because you also had some electronic intercepts of her discussing hanging on to drugs and cash for this dude. That's what was used to get the warrant from the judge. Yeah,
and if memory serves me correct here, it was recorded inside the jail where she was talking to her boyfriend, perhaps?
Yeah. Well, that's close. So what happened was after the shooting, after that incident, when Glover went to jail and when Walker went to jail, those are where the phone calls came in. And Glover was like, man, I've got to have somebody go get my money. She's holding my money. And he told his baby mama that, one of his other girlfriends. And she was like, well, why is she holding your money? I've got the other stuff, or I've got your money. And he's like, well, she's holding a lot of people's money. It's just what she does. So she, and a lot of these guys do this. It's nothing out of the norm. they'll keep stuff at different locations, mainly women, because they're able to manipulate them, use them, whatever, pay their bills. I'm not sure all the different ins and outs of this situation. But yeah, she had her money, or she had Glover's money along with other guys' money stashed away in the apartment.
Gotcha. I guess take us back to that night before you left to go to the apartment building itself. Part of the controversy surrounding this is the no-knock warrant. I'd like to hear your thoughts first before we get into what actually happened that night on the no-knock warrant itself, and if you think this is a good thing for America.
Well, I'll preface it with this. No knocks just for drugs? No, I don't agree with them. No knocks, though, they have a place. They're very important when you're dealing with a murder suspect, a possible kidnapping, situations that have very large exigent circumstances that require the surprise element, where you have to come in and psychologically overwhelm the suspect you're going for, so you have the advantage. Looking back, I mean, I've done them before for narcotics. After this incident, obviously, I almost lost my life in this. I say they're not worth it. Drugs ain't worth it. It's everywhere. You can get dope anywhere you turn in the city. So no, I think there needs to be guidelines to them. However, this one wasn't a no-knock. It was originally signed for because of Jamarcus Glover's past with his multiple felonies with guns and drugs and running from the police and destroying evidence. So that was one of the cases here. But once we realized that he was not going to be at Breonna's apartment, once we realized, because they had a tracker on his vehicle, a ping on his phone, they knew where he was, we stayed within the elements of what a no-knock should be. And we retracted that and made it a knock and announce. And that's one of the big things that people say, oh, it was a no-knock warrant. Even Rand Paul, and I like Rand Paul, I like a lot of the stuff he says, but even he used this knowing, I'm assuming he knew it wasn't a no-knock, because we had already put it out by this point saying, no, we knocked and announced. But he grandstand and used it as a way to push through a bill for no-knock warrants. And again, I think there's a place for them, but I think you've got to be selective. Like any branch of government, you got to be careful with overreach, because things do get taken advantage of, and government's got to be on a tight leash or it gets out of control.
Yeah, because D'Anthony and I were discussing that before the show started about a no-knock warrant. We're not that big of fans unless it's in cases like you said, where it's, hey, you really fucking need the goddamn thing to go into the house. Otherwise, for drugs, it's such a minor.
It's too risky.
I've got
the risk reward just isn't worth it.
Yeah, my standard for it is, would I use a flashbang or not? Like, honestly, that's my standard for it. If I would feel justified using a flashbang, then I would do a no-knock warrant, and I would only do a no-knock and use a flashbang, because it'll incapacitate somebody, and you take the element of lethal force is reduced by 80-some%. Because the person's lying on the ground fucking writhing, and you don't have to go in and fucking shoot them up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and they're psychologically just overwhelmed. I don't care who you are. If you're woken up, if you're woken up with that stuff, and I mean, you're going to be like, where am I? What's going on?
Yeah, even just a standard concussion grenade without the light is enough to do it. But yeah, I can tell you.
We agree on that then.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I know what would happen if there was a no-knock served at my home. Mm-hmm. And it would not be good for the people coming through my fucking door, right? I'm not some knucklehead slinging dope on the street.
Sure.
But, it's when you weigh the risk versus reward of something like that, if the person, I mean, we do these kinds of cost benefit analysis in tactical shit all the time. Like how... That's why, and even in the military, we started using tactical call-outs, right? Like we would sit back 100, 150 meters, put some weapons on the door and say, hey, you kind of come out here or we're coming in. You know what I mean? At least give the guy the opportunity. Now, if you're trying to catch somebody with dope on them, that's a different story. But the difference between a guy sitting in his house and walking out the front door is so extreme. Like whatever weapon he may have on him, if he's carrying a weapon around during the day, is in a place where it's going to be hard for him to get to if you're fucking lighting his ass up as soon as he walks out the door. But if he's sitting in his home, it's probably right here where mine is.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it adds an extra element of danger that is just completely fucking unnecessary because you don't know, like Breonna Taylor was in this house, right? But you don't know if there's fucking kids in the house and all kinds of other bullshit. It's just too much risk. Doesn't
Right.
make
Yeah,
sense.
it's dangerous, and plus when you're going in somebody's house, they already have the advantage because they know the layout of their house and you don't. I mean, you might have an idea or you know what it's like, but they know all the nooks and crannies. They know where they want to be if they want the tactical advantage, just like Kenneth Walker had it that night. You know, there was no way to win this. When I turned that corner, when he's already in a stance, it was too late. I mean, you're done.
Yeah.
Now his charges were dropped, right?
Right.
And what was the reasoning?
Yeah, what was the reasoning behind that?
Because the prosecutor didn't think, and without them following up on some other evidence, we kind of revealed later. And I agree with the prosecutor on this as far as I think it would be almost impossible to get 12 people with a good attorney to say beyond a reasonable doubt he knew for a fact we were the police. I don't excuse it. I think he's lying. I think he knew just based on some conversation his mom had with a police officer on scene that was actually friends with Kenneth Walker and his mom, that said, you know, Kenneth called me and said, "Hey, Mom, they're at the door." And she said, "Who, baby?" He said, "It's the police. I got to go," and hung up. And they had a minute, you know, to work all this out. And why anybody would take their woman into a hall with them if they really thought their door was getting kicked in just blows my mind. I'd be like, "Hey, stay in the bedroom, call 911."
Yeah.
Instead, you know, they're out there just lollygagging, waiting. And it just, you know, the psychological thing was flipped on me because I've probably made 2,000 entries over the course of my career. And when I turned that corner and saw two people there in the wait, ready down the hall, my mind went, well, this isn't right. Normally they're running, they're fighting, they're pitching dope, they're doing something, but they're giving up. But rarely do you turn and see two people just waiting on an ambush. So it was a little bizarre. The whole situation was just, you know, unfortunate.
Yeah, and walk us through that. You go into work that day. Do you know you're getting a no-knock warrant in advance, or did they tell you on the day?
It wasn't a no-knock warrant.
Oh, well, it wasn't a no-knock warrant.
Knock and announce.
Right.
So it's like bang, bang, bang.
Knock and announce. But do you know in the station that day of like, hey, this is what you guys you're doing tonight? When does that get, you know, released to you?
So on this particular event, they're all different. You know, dope work's very fluid, but this was one that they had been working on for like 2.5 months. And so they knew it involved 5 locations. It was manpower intensive. So they had sent emails out asking people, hey, can you volunteer? Can you come in on overtime? Can you adjust your work schedule? Can you do whatever you can to help us with this? Because we need bodies. Even though they had SWAT serving a couple of them, they still needed a bunch of bodies. So it wasn't my unit doing the warrant. We were basically hired help that day. And
so it's like sweeps. You guys were doing sweeps.
Yeah, similar.
Okay.
So we came in and they said, I actually picked the apartment because I knew where the trap house was, the location. I'd worked in that area for years. And I'm like, oh man, I know how nasty and dirty those houses are. I don't want to search it. I don't want to deal with the crowd that's going to gather. Because anytime you do in those areas, in the urban areas, you're going to have, you know, 50 to 100 people cussing you, yelling, gathering around. I'm like, man, I'm just tired of that. Because, you know, we talked about the warrants earlier and the risk reward. Probably over the last 2 years of my career, I was over our major case unit, which involved FBI, DEA, ATF, and we would take warrants, and on the majority of them, we had switched over to pulling this guy off at a gas station or grabbing him at a barber shop or somewhere else just because it was safer, and we could take them back and walk them into the house as opposed to dynamic entries.
Then they don't have the opportunity to fucking pick up a weapon or throw their dope away or any of that bullshit.
Right. It made life so much easier, but this wasn't my call. We were help on this one. So I knew it like a week ahead of time that we were doing it. So I worked my normal shift that day.
Okay.
I had just left FedEx and the brief was at 10 o'clock at night. And so I came in and because I was I'd switched over to parcel interdiction at this point. So I was at FedEx looking at packages. So I left FedEx. I came into the office. We gathered, there's like 40 or 50 people in the room. They broke down the different apartments, who was on what position you had, RAM, pick, you know, the eye, the view, the cover officer, all that stuff. So we broke this down on the board. And then we left and we went to a secondary location, which is where my small group of 7 guys met up. And that's where we did, I guess, like a secondary brief, you call it, where I went by, got eyes on the apartment to make sure I knew exactly which door we were hitting so we didn't make any mistakes. came back, told them the intel that I gathered, and then we mounted up. Now that night was just, so it was the 12th when we started, but by the time this warrant was served, it was Friday the 13th.
Oh, wow.
It was a full moon. It was raining out. I came out of the brief and I had 2 flat tires on my car. Somebody had come through the parking lot and poked holes in a few cars. And so I went back in and got the tools and came back out. I had to get a new car, get out there. So I was hustling. I get there, I see these EMS guys. They're both maybe 20, 21 years old. I mean, they were young. And because we always have EMS stage on these warrants in case there's any of these issues. And I pull up and I look at them and I'm like, oh man, in my mind, I'm thinking, are these the guys that if I get shot are going to have to save my life? Because you just knew they weren't experienced. Not that they were bad guys, just weren't experienced. And so then around 12:35 is when SWAT announced on the radio that they were making their approach, which is when we decided, they wanted us to do it simultaneously so no evidence was destroyed. And so we made our way about a half mile down the road to Breonna Taylor's apartment.
Got it. And so once you get there, what was the game plan headed in? Because you're able to see it. You're able to see the door. You're able to see other apartments that are surrounding it and everything else. What was the game plan once you hit the front door?
Well, the game plan, first of all, was, originally you had the no knock, and then it went to knock and announce. But in the brief, they said, hey, will you give this one more time? She's a heavier set black female. Give her additional time to come to the door, which, I mean, you guys were operators, so you understand when somebody asks you to do something out of the norm that you normally do, you don't like it.
I say no, but we have that fucking luxury. I don't know if you're a police officer, you really have that luxury.
We probably did, but I was trying to be compliant with the lead detectives because they were going to have to be the one to deal with them, to try to gather more intelligence and counter stuff out of them. So typically on a search warrant, you're knocking for, the Supreme Court says 10 seconds is a reasonable enough time to give someone to come to the door. It's still pretty quick, but 10 seconds gives you the time to announce yourself. So at least they can hear you, even if they haven't made it to the door yet. They know that it's the police getting ready to come in. And, there's been plenty of times where people have made it to the door and they've opened the door and let us in. And those are great. But on the times like this one, we gave it almost a minute or right at a minute of banging on that door, yelling police, not knowing what's on the other side. So then you're like, man, this just doesn't feel right. I don't like this, but I'm going to do it. And that was a mistake. I mean, it really was, because had we either served the no knock or simply done what we always do, I don't think the outcome would have been the same.
And then when you go into the house, and this, by the way, news to me, because what I had heard, through the media was that you guys were shooting outside through the window. I didn't know people actually went in to the house. How many officers ended up going inside the house?
Nobody made it through the door. I was in the threshold. So when the door came open, it swung from right to left. Okay. I was on the left side of the door, so I could see where the door opened. I had a visual, and I sliced the pie from right to left in the living room as we're announcing police. So I cleared that whole area until the real estate ran out. My visual real estate ran out where the door frame and the hall wall began. So at that point, it's time to go through the fatal funnel, nothing else to do. As soon as I stepped my body into that door frame and got a visual straight down the hall, about 25, 30 feet away in this dark hall, it had the TV illuminating, giving some light out. We had some gun-mounted lights. But as soon as I swiveled from right to left and came upon Kenneth Walker with my view, all I saw was kind of a blob of 2 bodies co-joined. And then I had a taller head and a smaller head.
Both,
they were like
both standing up?
Oh, yeah, standing up.
Okay.
Overlapping one another. It was almost like one figure, but tall head, small head. So I knew it was 2 people, but I never even got visually around to Breonna Taylor because my eyes stopped on Kenneth Walker's gun. I could see the silver at the end of his gun pointed straight at me. And by the time my mind's registering that, because this is all milliseconds, as soon as my mind registered that, boom, it went off. I returned 4 shots. I got off center, got behind the door frame, came back around, got 2 more off. And then I stepped out because I knew I was out of the game. I'd been hit. And that's when Miles stepped up when I went down on my butt.
And where did you get hit exactly?
It was the upper left thigh, and it ripped through the femoral artery.
Ooh, Jesus
femoral,
Christ.
However you say it.
Yeah, that's close.
That's a nasty wound.
I don't know that I've ever heard anybody say it the same way twice, but yeah, that's rough. I mean, obviously it didn't retract, otherwise you'd be fucking dead.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was fortunate too, because I had I carry my wallet in my front pocket and it had a metal clip for the money. And when that bullet went in, it deflected it just enough where it didn't explode my femur, because it was in straight line with my femur bone. It's saying my internet's unstable. We'll see.
No, you're good. You're good on our
Okay.
end. Yeah.
So when it went through, with all 20 years of training on CPR and all this stuff, when I stepped back, I knew I'd been hit. So I just reached down and felt it, and I could feel a handful of blood. And I thought, man, this ain't just a normal leg wound, because I've seen plenty of those too. And they bleed a little bit, but they're not much. If it's a flat, if it goes through and through and it doesn't hit anything major, it bleeds a little bit. And that's it. And I could feel my handful. So I immediately announced to these guys, I said, I've been hit by femoral. And that's when I got on my butt, because I thought, man, I can't let my heart pump out. But then I realized Miles is shooting above me. And I thought, well, now I'm going to get hit in crossfire. I got to get out of here. So I got up and I hobbled out, and I couldn't put any weight bearing on that leg because the muscle had just quit. It just wasn't working. I was on tendons and bones. And so when I hit the curb out there, instinctively, I stepped off with my left leg and I went down again. That's when I holstered my gun up, and my lieutenant grabbed my vest from behind, slid me out. And thankfully, one of the guys had a tourniquet right there, because that's the first thing I was telling him on my way out. I was like, get me a tourniquet. I need a tourniquet. Because, your first thought is, okay, survival. I'm out of that situation. Now I got to get a tourniquet on this leg. And then once the tourniquet was on, I was like, all right, you got to get me to the hospital, because I'm good with living, but I don't want to be a one-legged man. And it was still on for I think 34 minutes or something like that. And I'll tell you what, I'll take a gunshot any day over a tourniquet, because that thing, man, that hurt.
Man. So while you're on the ground and you're getting, tended to, the other three officers, did they stay outside, or did anybody ever go inside?
None of those guys went inside. What happened was, because you mentioned something about the window, I'll explain.
Yes.
That. So while I'm at the door, so this is a inset hallway that's got, metal stairs, some bricks, some siding. So everything's echoing inside this tunnel, basically. And as I'm hobbling out, Miles he had stepped over me initially to put some fire down range where the threat was coming from. And simultaneously, Hankinson had shuffled from the stack. He was too far back in the stack to get up and assist at the door. Plus, it's just too much chaos at the door. He had gone around the front of the apartment, because he had done a quick peek as we were going in, because he was going to be probably the third body in. And he had quick peeked around that door and saw the gunshot happen. And then he heard the other gunshots going off. And so as he went around the front of the building, he knew where about they were standing in the apartment. And all he heard was Miles basically unloading his gun over here. And it sounded like machine gun fire, because it was so quick. I think he emptied 16 rounds in maybe 4 or 5 seconds. And so Brett thought in his mind, man, my buddies are getting executed at this doorway, because he didn't see me hobble out. So as I'm passing out, as I'm coming out on the sidewalk and Miles is still firing, that's when Brett began firing through the patio door and then through the bedroom window, because he thought we were getting assassinated. He's like, man, I've got to do something to get them to quit shooting them at the door.
Yeah.
And so that's where that happened. And, are we trained to do that? No, but am I thankful he was willing to do that, thinking he was saving my life? Heck
Well,
yeah.
what would be the alternative to do? I mean, look, obviously, being a police officer and fucking being an infantry dude are pretty disparate situations. But if bullets are coming in my direction from a direction, I'm sending bullets back in that direction. I don't give a fuck who's standing over there, frankly.
Yeah, policy be damned. I'm going to do what it takes to get out of this and go home. And then, 12 people judge me as opposed to 6 people carry me. So that's the philosophy he took. And thank God the jury saw it that way.
But what are you? I mean, you said that's not what you're trained to do. What would have been the buy the book thing, just to sit there and wait until they run out of ammo?
The by the book thing, which is very stringent, is you have to physically see your target, because, you're accountable for every round, which I get. But at the same time, this isn't a textbook situation. It's not just me and you in this standoff where I can see you, you can see me. This is a fluid happening very quickly, chaotic, loud, but it's quick. I mean, the entire thing was over in 10 seconds.
Yeah.
That's where I got 12 seconds in the dark at for the book title, was from the time that door opened until the time the gunfire stopped. And I was in the parking lot with Hoover dragging me was no more than 12 seconds.
But
there's that 12 seconds of just chaos.
Yeah, I've definitely been there. So there's 7 of you guys?
Yes.
And you're not all going through the door, right? Like the op plan can't be for that because you're going to run into short rooms.
Yeah, you're in an apartment. It's like too small.
Any more than 3 to 5 people is way too much for a fucking building that size. So what do you got, a cordon set up around the fucking area or something? How does it?
Well, we had one guy on the outside.
Yeah.
6 were going to go in, but what we generally do is one will like hold the hallway or hold the living room as the other ones make their way down the hall and clear those rooms. It just depends on like I said, it's fluid because everything's different. And one of the mistakes, there were mistakes in this, we're human. Every op has a mistake. When you look back, just not all of them are fatal.
No plan survives first contact.
Right.
That's a good quote to remember.
I'll have to remember that. Maybe I'll say that in one of these talks I'm giving here in Iowa. But I'll credit you. Don't worry.
I didn't come up with that shit. I think it was fucking General Eisenhower that said that shit.
Oh, well, yeah. Somebody a little wiser than all of us. Huh? But yeah, so that's the way it generally goes down.
Okay, and to confirm here, because we've gotten a ton of media reports that are very, very different than what you've said so far, and we'll get into that later on. But to confirm, shots were fired from inside the apartment towards you guys first before you returned fire, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, because we've heard it all over the place. We also heard that Breonna Taylor died in bed. She was peacefully sleeping in bed, and you can confirm that was 100% not the truth.
100% not true. Yeah, okay. I mean, the media's had access to the same photos that once the AG released everything and put it online, they were blurred out, but the photos were there of her in the hallway. So for people to continue to spread that it's mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, it's stupid. That, by the way, that was Moltke the Elder, a 19th century German imperial general.
Big fan of his early work.
It was Eisenhower said plans are of little importance, but planning is essential. Some of that.
All right, close enough.
Yeah.
Close enough. When did you first learn about Breonna Taylor's death?
So when I woke up from surgery, it was a 5-hour surgery. When I woke up, this is weird. I looked at the clock and I saw it was 7:30 in the morning. And my first question was, what blood type am I? Because I couldn't remember. And then I don't know if I was thinking, shoot, I'm bleeding out and I don't know what blood type I am at some point. And subconsciously, I guess. And I said, what blood type am I? And they said, you're A positive. Then my wife walked in. I went, did anybody else get hurt or die during this? Because I didn't know. Everything was so dark and quick. And Kenneth Walker wouldn't come out. He didn't come out of the apartment for 16 minutes. So nobody knew what had taken place actually on the inside until he finally came out and they were able to clear the apartment.
Okay, and so when he does come out, does he come out peacefully? Is he fighting with other officers? And does he say anything to the officers that, hey, my girlfriend has been shot and I think she's been killed?
Yeah, he finally came out. He came out with his hands up. He came out with the phone initially. They told him to put it down. He did. He walked back to him. They said, who else is in the apartment? He said, my girlfriend, she's dead. And then he said, what's going on here? And somebody said, well, you shot a cop. That's what's going on. And he said, it wasn't me. She shot a cop. And they were like, so you shot or she shot? He said, she shot. It's her 9. And later on, he changed it to him shooting. But it just goes to show his character that his initial response was to protect himself and cover up by throwing this person he loved more than anything under the bus and saying she's the one that shot, knowing she couldn't refute it.
Right. That's interesting. So he did know she was dead while he was in the apartment.
That's what he said, yeah.
Wow.
Well, he was in there for 16 minutes, like I said, and I'm sure he saw her take her last breath.
And you said there was a phone conversation during the moments he was in there with his mother.
Correct. So what we know for certain, from his phone records from his phone records, was that he called after the shooting. And we'll go back to the other statement in a second. But
sure.
After the shooting, he called his mom and talked to her for 3 or 4 minutes. Then he called 911 about 6 minutes after the shooting. Then he called Breonna Taylor's mom. And I think at some point his mom 3-wayed back in on that call. We couldn't really tell by the phone records. It was really bizarre the way it looked. But Breonna had 2 phones that we know of, and they only downloaded one of those. They couldn't get into the other one, and I don't think they ever subpoenaed the phone records for it. We've had tough times getting straight answers from anybody on this case, which has been the most frustrating part. But in the statement, what happened was there's a guy who is called what's a courtesy officer. Guys get discounts if they live in apartment complexes, drive their marked cars there, take care of any little incidents that take place so they don't have to call the police. And the guy that was the courtesy officer of this apartment went to high school with Kenneth Walker. And not only that, he knew Kenneth Walker's mom. They were friends. So and he admitted, I talked to Kenneth Walker frequently, come in and out when I'd seen him driving in and out, so forth. Well, he said he was in his apartment. He heard the gunshots. He turned his radio on. He threw his uniform on because he heard an officer had been shot, and he came down. He said when he came down there a few minutes later, Kenneth Walker's mom showed up on scene. She was the first one because Kenny had called her. Mm-hmm. And so she came up to him because she knew him. And that's when she said that phrase I told you earlier that, hey, the police are at the door. I got to call you back. So we don't know if maybe something was misconstrued there and that conversation actually took place after the shooting or before, since we don't have any access to that third phone. But regardless, he knew after the shooting, he knew we were the police when he talked to his mom, obviously. Mm-hmm. But then when he called 911, his statement was, somebody just broke into my house and killed my girlfriend. I don't know who it is. So just a lot of inconsistencies, a lot of lies. His gun was under a bed. And he said after he shot, he fell and threw the gun under the bed. And if you think you're getting home invaded, why in the world would you throw your gun under a bed? That just makes no sense. So just a lot of things that don't add up. And we've got him on tape lying on a few other things as far as saying that he helped her down. He cradled her while she died. And all that's tragic that she died. I don't want to discount any of that at all. But the fact that you have like a couple little bitty blood spatters on your clothes when in the photos there was an enormous amount of blood on the scene there, and it just lies.
Yeah, and it's interesting to hear it from your account because you were there. Because all the information we're getting is from the press and the media, which will lead me to the next morning. So you come out of surgery, you're in there. Is there a part in a cop's mind where you're like, oh shit, somebody's dead from this, I'm fucked? Like, because we've seen nothing but officers going to jail on the news recently for different cases like this along the way. Was that the next thought through your mind, is like, oh my God, I'm fucked and we're all fucked here because somebody's dead?
Well, there's two factors at play. And I'm sure just like in your all's career, taking someone's life, you don't take it lightly, but if you got to do it, you got to do it. I mean, that's just the business we're in, right? If you're protecting yourself or you're protecting somebody else and somebody chooses to go down that road, then so be it. However, your biggest fear, at least mine, has always been, I don't want to kill an innocent person trying to take care of business with the right person. I don't want to make a mistake or shoot the wrong person. And in my mind, I felt, oh man, crud. I never saw a gun in her hand, so I don't think it was her that shot. But the way with Kenneth, what he did was there was an inset in this wall, and this hall was a super narrow hallway. We're talking maybe 3 feet in width. And when he shot, he instantly dove behind this wall that was there. And I think Breonna tried to follow him in the way her body was laying, because it looks like she had shifted to her left, and you could see the bullet holes in the walls right where Kenneth Walker was standing. And I think she caught some of those rounds following him into the room and fell back. But the second part of that, what the question you asked me is, ever since Michael Brown in 2015 in Ferguson, it used to be a police involved shooting, your buddies would call you and go, hey man, we just had so-and-so was involved in a shooting. You used to go, oh man, was it a good shoot? That's all you needed to worry about. Now the first question out of every cop's mouth, and now media and everybody else, was the suspect black or white?
Yep.
And it shouldn't matter. That shouldn't not even be in play. It should simply be, was it a justified shoot? But now you've got this other element that overwhelms and overtakes the narrative, no matter if it's a good shoot or bad shoot. And then all this other drama gets thrown in, and these departments refuse to step up and back their officers. And it just causes a lot of issues.
Yeah, I mean, look, some of that is...
We were just talking about last week.
Some of that goes in the opposite direction, too, where there's this Stop Asian Hate movement going on. Stop who from hating Asians?
Yeah.
Because it's not a bunch of white dudes beating up Asian people in fucking subways. You know what I mean? Not that that's relevant, but it would have been if it had been. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And, you know, there's also big problems in policing across the country. Probably to a lesser degree these days, but we've seen some pretty fucked up shit happen on a regular basis from the LA in the 90s, early 90s, New York in the late 1990s, where Bernie Carrick was this fucking, I don't know what he did with all those homeless people. I think they're all working at Starbucks.
Or they're just dead.
Yeah.
Just
But
dead.
yeah, I mean, there's been some stuff, and it's the problem is when opportunists in the media and politics get involved, and it obfuscates the conversation that's happening. For example, the conversation we had to open up this show is the concept of no-knock warrants is a flawed one, except for in some extreme cases. But that is, for a lot of departments, been the standard because they feel like the element of surprise protects their officers. That's not always the case. If the element of surprise is persistent through the operation, then it does. But if it's not, like if you have to make noise getting in there and there's no way to stop that, then you're at a fucking disadvantage because the guy could just be standing on the other side of the door pointing a gun at you already. That's how Derek White lost his leg, because there was some fucking Hodge dude pointing an AK at the door and just ripped through the door when they were about to breach it. That fucking sucks. But you can't have an honest conversation about tactics, because it's not about tactics to them. It's about fucking finding somebody to blame to advance their cause so they're fucking super PACing, make more money. Right, so BLM can get $60 million, and you know, where the fuck did it go?
Yeah,
mostly into real estate, actually. If you follow that thread, but
same in Louisville. The BLM chapter in Louisville just purchased a property last year, and this lady doesn't work, but she paid $1 million cash for this property. They got a firing range on it. They bought a armed vehicle. They've got a gate on it. I mean, you know, is that where that money was supposed to go to help the black community? I don't think so, but that's what they're doing with it, and they're pocketing all this. And you talked about earlier, you know, we're talking about no knocks. I mean, that's just a tool in your tool belt, right? We've got many tools that don't equate to the certain jobs we do. Kind of like on our instance with like Andy Stump asked me, did you have iron sights or?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I did, because it was a pistol, because we're no longer allowed to use long rifles to go through doors like we used to. We used to have one guy assigned a long rifle, one guy assigned a shotgun, and the rest of us carried pistols. And they said, no, only SWAT guys can do that. So I don't know why we trained on it.
Just from a safety standpoint, an M4 with frangible rounds is way more safe than anything you're going to put like a handgun projectile. Yeah, it's going to mushroom and shit. But if there's other people in the room, you're talking about getting shrapnel all over the fucking place, punching through fucking drywall and shit like that. Frangible
Which
round
happened in this case.
Yeah, it always happens. Frangible round hits anything of any real mass density, and it just fucking completely shatters.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And it's same with our pistols. We're not allowed to have optics on our pistols, which I don't understand why. And, you know, there's just so many things that you go, you know, as things progress, why are we not progressing with them? Why are we staying back? And then we get in these trick bags. And instead of saying, well, you know, leadership didn't allow for these things, so we're going to blame the officer. And it's just their easy way out. And it's chasing a lot of good guys off the job. And all you're going to do by chasing all these good cops off is revert back to the 80s and 90s from Detroit and New Orleans, and have corrupt cops who are stealing money and assaulting people and doing all these things they shouldn't do. I mean, there's enough bad apples as there is, because you're dealing with, you know, human beings. We're all flawed. People are screwed up, and some of them get through the cracks, and some of them are cops, some are firemen, some are lawyers, doctors. Doesn't matter. In every profession, there's something. But you're just going to amplify that by doing what you're doing, because every department is so short now. They're starting to take people with criminal records. I mean, it's unbelievable, some of the stuff I hear, and I'm going, from my own department. And I'm going, how in the world? You know, you went from you had to have a college degree to no degree to now as long as your criminal record's over 5 years old for selling cocaine, you're good. And I'm going, oh my gosh, you know, we're going down that path. Before long, we're all going to be screwed.
Yeah, I mean, there's no industry that's ever existed that had what anybody would consider fundamental flaws that got improved by giving it less effort and money.
Right.
That's fucking stupid, right? It also doesn't help, you know, and this is something that you see widespread in American politics, maybe elsewhere as well, but just the fact that everybody is trying to win, right? Instead of trying to find the correct solution, everybody's trying to win the argument. And it's resulted in a number of things. One, people that are on the police side of the argument will protect shitty officers, and people that are on the other side of that argument will accuse any officer of being fucked up regardless if they're fucked up or not, right? Mm-hmm. That is not a conversation that's happening in good faith, and I can't imagine these people who are profiting off of that, whether it be through politics or fundraising or whatever the fuck. Maybe it's just their fucking social currency, whatever it is. But these, we see these are life and death scenarios all the time that happen because people are trying to keep communities safe and blah, blah, blah. The stakes could not be higher here. And people are taking advantage of that situation. It's one of the most fucked up things I've ever seen in American politics, is how fucking political just policing has become. Even when you go into the biggest study done on this was done in West fucking Oakland, right? And I used to live like 5 minutes from there. I know what this place looks like. And they asked residents, like fucking 6,000 residents, hey, do you want more police, less police, or the same amount of police? 83% said either more or the same amount of police. Mm-hmm. It's just simply not true that people do not want safe neighborhoods.
Right.
It's just not, that's fucking stupid. Why would they not want that?
Well, I think we all want that. We want, I think the majority of America is alike. You know, you've got that fringe on each side, the 10% who are just radicals and just drive you nuts, whether it's right or left with all their craziness. But then you got everybody in the middle that's like, hey, let me go to work. Let me support my family. Government, leave me alone. Let me have the same opportunities as everybody else and just stay out of my way. And if they would do that, instead of having their finger and their thumb on every single thing in our life, I think a lot of things would be better.
Yeah, I agree.
What are the scariest words in the English language?
Yeah.
I'm from the government. I'm here to help.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, fuck off, dude. I've got it.
Did you guys know that you would be indicted after this happened?
Didn't know. I mean, we didn't have a clue until, it took, I think, in August or September, whatever it was, when the AG's office put that out. We watched it on TV like everybody else, just waiting to see, kind of like when they dismissed Kenneth Walker's charges. I found out through social media.
Really?
Yeah. There was a lot. We were put on an island, man. We had leprosy, the cops involved. I mean, the department wouldn't reach out. The FBI were a bunch of turds in this thing, man. It's a whole nother story. They're a mess. And the DOJ is still investigating us. That's not over yet.
Right.
They're supposed to come out with indictments. The last I heard was around May, Derby time, 1st of May. So we'll see there. I know just this last week or a few days ago, they indicted Katie Cruz, an officer that the day after the riot started, they had sent a group down to disperse a huge crowd on a business lot, and curfew was passed, and these people were causing problems, shooting guns, doing different things. She shot a pepper ball gun, which she was ordered to do to try to disperse the crowd. Somebody, I guess, thought they were getting shot at. They come out at the police, fire around at the police. There's a National Guard there with them. One of them shoots him and he dies. And so now the feds have indicted her for civil rights violation for shooting a pepper ball.
Oh, boy.
And that's opening Pandora's box for any time there's any type of use of force, because that's super low on the force continuum. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's near the bottom. And for them to come out, and so the guy the whole reason we were there, Jamarcus Glover, he's out. They let him out. Kenneth Walker shot me, instigated all this stuff with Breonna. He's out, no charges. Yet the cop who shot a pepper ball is indicted by the DOJ. Everything's backwards, man. And it's a scary time to be a police officer, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I said the same when Dexter was on the show. But you're right. It wasn't September, and it was your partner, Brett Hankinson. And it was for the wanton endangerment. What happened with that? Because to my knowledge, I believe that all of you guys have gotten off, correct?
Well, wanton endangerment is firing, what he was talking about earlier, firing your weapon without a direct, like a known target, I guess, for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah.
Right. No, he had trial on that. It ended, I think, 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
They were only out 3 hours. They came back and they sided with Brett, and he was acquitted. And so, in my opinion, justice was done there because, like I said, may have been not exactly by the letter of the law, but it was within the spirit of the law. as far as, he was protecting people, and that's how deadly force is able to be used when you're protecting your life or someone else's. And I was super relieved because even though I didn't cause anyone else's actions, I didn't cause any of the guys who've been indicted, because we got one guy sitting in federal prison right now from during this riot. The guy was I think a 14-year Marine veteran. He had served 3 tours in Iraq, had a little bit of PTSD, been down here in all these riots, people cussing at you, throwing stuff, spitting on you. I mean, it was ridiculous, the stuff they were getting away with. And one day, during an arrest, some guy was saying something and he snapped and hit him in the head with a stick, and they indicted him and he got 3 years of prison time for it. So I've got a little bit of that survivor's guilt for these guys who have lost their jobs, who have been indicted, who are in prison. Even though it's not my fault, I still feel like, man, if I had just hit maybe the right target, there's all these things that go through your head that even though it's not my fault, I feel guilty.
So are you currently still on the police force right now?
No, I retired May of last year for the simple fact of this. I was going back to work. I'd rehabbed. I told my wife from the beginning, I'm like, look, the first thing I do when I go back is I'm going to do a warrant, because none of this stuff had quite blown up yet. So I rehabbed hard. I got my health back. I got cleared to go back to work. They still kept me off because of the investigations. Then when I was allowed to go back
what, you
to
were
work,
on modified assignment or what?
right. Yeah. So when I was allowed to go back to work and physically, take my badge back and have police powers, I showed up to work and they handed me a letter that said, you're being transferred. And I was like, why am I being transferred? And it was to the property room. They're hiding me out in the dungeon, basically. And I said, what's this about? I didn't violate any policy. I didn't violate any laws. And they were like, no, the chief just said it's for the good of the department. And I guess they don't want you out there, your face anywhere. And I was like, okay. So I could see the writing on the wall where this was going, because our mayor had pushed and pushed and pushed for us to be fired. I mean, he'd gotten in public and said, we're going to do everything we can to have justice for Breonna and take care of these officers and all this stuff. So I was like, you know what? I want to be able to speak my mind. And I know if I stay here, I can't tell the truth because these cowards aren't doing it. So I'm going to come out and speak my mind. And if I do that, they'll fire me. So I'll just go ahead and retire. I had enough time, so I got out.
Wow. How many years had you been on at that point? Were you close to any form of retirement?
At 21.
What's that, like
at the shooting,
55% or something?
Yeah, 55%. So it's not great, but, I got it. Unlike the guys that got fired.
Yeah.
They got shafted, so I didn't want to be one of those guys.
Man, and who do you get? You just get your normal standard prosecution? Because I'm assuming you can't afford these high-powered lawyers that you always see on TV, right? How does that work for officers?
Well, we pay through our FOP. We pay each check into a legal defense fund, and they have a group of lawyers. They're not bad. There's one that's particularly good, but most of them aren't your high-powered, defense lawyers that are $400 or $500 an hour, because they've got to agree to a lower rate. So when this happened, the FOP agreed to pick up the difference in whatever attorney we wanted, which was great. So I reached out to 6 or 7 of our really well-known attorneys in Jefferson County that have beaten me on cases. And I said, would you be willing to take this case? And every single one of them lied or came up with an excuse, and they couldn't. Finally, the last guy was honest with me. He said, John, listen, I want to take your case. My wife's freaking out. They're going to come after us, because by this time we'd already had death threats. We had been doxxed, all this stuff. He said, and my son's coming out of law school. He's got my name. He's coming to my practice. The type people we take on. This would totally ruin my practice, and we would be canceled. So I get it, and I appreciated his honesty, because at least somebody had the guts to tell the truth.
Right.
And so I had to get an actual civil attorney as my defense attorney. But the only good thing about this civil attorney is he used to be a federal prosecutor for criminal stuff, so he understood that. But one of the guys had to get a guy from another state, and one of the guys had to get a guy from another city, from Lexington. So it's pretty pathetic that even though we're allowed counsel, we aren't granted the same level of counsel because of the position we're in. Right. So you talk about a bias or a slant. I mean, there was definitely no white privilege there, I'll tell you that.
And how hard was this on your family in particular during all of this? Because like you said, you got doxxed and everything else. Were there people showing up to the house at all? Were there people harassing your wife? How bad did it actually get?
Well, initially, they still had their social medias open, and man, all of a sudden they just got inundated with death threats and hate, and we're going to rape your kids, we're going to burn your houses down, we're going to come do a no knock on you and kill, and they would name the kids. And so I was like, screw it, you all get out, I'll stay here, let them come, I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife was like, no, please don't do that. So we had just moved in this house 5 weeks prior, just bought it. And so on May 31st, the FBI called through our liaison, through our TFO, and said they've got to get out of their house. We've got good intel that from 2 different sources that they got a $50,000 bounty on their head, the officer or someone in their family, because her birthday's coming up and they're doing a balloon release and they want to have something to celebrate. So we had to get out of our house. We went to another location a couple hours away, and we never went back to our house other than to clean it out. And we had to sell it, and we moved like 5 times during this period. And so it's been very stressful, mainly on the wife. The stressful part for me wasn't the threats against me. It was the feeling of, because, we're all type A, we want to handle the situation. We want to handle the problem. And being away from my kids, they were with me for a few weeks, but then they had to return to their jobs and lives. They're married, one has kids. So they had to go back to what they do to survive, because nobody's paying them to come here. Nobody's paying us. The city didn't even find a place for us to go. I had to scrap at midnight, calling around everybody I knew till I found a place we could go to. And so when they went back home and they started having, the city at least did give us a body on each of their houses for a few months.
Okay.
But the problem was there's like 5 different documented times where people would come by their house, take pictures, scope it out, do different things. And so as a parent, as a dad, that's unnerving because I'm so far away and I can't do anything to help. So that was the hardest part on me, because, man, I would be so fired up, man. I mean, just, adrenaline through the roof, ready to just go berserk on somebody, and just didn't have the ability to do it.
Man, because, I'm hearing this, and as a father myself, all I keep thinking of is my children. For you and your children, are they old enough to understand who Dad is, what he did, and what he's going through?
Yeah, so I've got 3 adult children, and then I've got a small child. The small child didn't at first. He was only 5 at the time. So to him, he was just confused, like, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
And he's not a dumb kid. So once he registered, like one instance where we were staying, a weird car came and stopped out in front of the place we were staying, and it took off. And by the time I got outside, it took off. So I jumped in my car and was like, screw this, I'm going to find out who this is, and was looking for him. Well, while I was gone, he told my wife, he said he went and got a knife out of the kitchen drawer. And she said, what are you doing with that knife? He said, I'm going to protect you while Dad's gone. So that kind of stuff that affects them, because they hear, you try to protect them, but they're so nosy and they hear stuff and they pick up stuff that you think you're using code words, and they just get it. And, but my older kids understood it. And the funny thing is, my oldest daughter is married to a black guy and they have biracial kids. So when all this went down, I had to sit him down and say, look, because their friends were posting stuff on social media that they had heard through the news. And I said, look, we're all trained, or we all think, whether we're trained or not, we just think that the media is not going to lie to us, that where do I go for my source of information? To the news, right?
Yep.
And so these people are just ignorant on the facts. They don't know. I said, don't defriend them. You can share truths with them. And here's all the truth. And I laid it out for all the kids. And I said, this is what happened. And so until they get the truth, don't judge them. Just let them be, or try to explain to them, but don't hold it against them, because if all I was told for 2 years was the stuff I heard about us, I would believe it too, because nobody pushed back against the narrative. And you would think, well, if they're in the right and the media is wrong, why is nobody defending them? Why is nobody from the city pushing back, or the department? And so I told my son-in-law, I said, look, I know your family, they're black. So if there's any questions they have, I don't want this to cause problems with you all.
Yeah.
I'm an open book. Ask me anything. And he knows me. He knows I'm not racist. He understands. I mean, we love him. There's never been any issues. Him and my daughter have dated since she was in like 7th grade, and she's 25 now. So there's never been any issues there. So they know my character. They know who I am. And so that part was tough, though.
Yeah, I can only imagine because, as you're reading everything in the media, like you said, you want to believe that the media is true, and this is where we go for our source of news. I remember a New York Times article that was written about you. Most of what you said is not even close to being in this article, obviously. Do you sit back, or during this whole experience, did you sit back and read all these articles and ever think like, hey, I'm just going to call this guy from the New York Times? Like, if you want my fucking story, I'll give you my story.
Well, I did read them all because initially we were like, man, screw these people. I'm going to sue them all. Mm-hmm. But then we found out that police officers are considered public officials, which falls under the same guise by the Supreme Court as a public figure. So simple defamation, it can be done. There's no recourse for it. You have to prove malice, which is very tough to do because you have to prove intent. Yep. And so very few of those cases go anywhere. And so there was that frustration as well. I'm sitting there thinking, man, how can these people in positions of authority, especially the ones that I knew the truth, because I had given some of them the truth, like our city, city councilman, the president of our city council. I knew him personally. He used to be a police officer. He's retired. I reached out to him, gave him all the facts and said, man, our mayor will not say anything. Our chief won't say anything. Our city's getting ready to burn to the ground. This was like a week before all the protests began. I said, can you please get the truth out because somebody needs to hear it? And he said, oh, I'll do a press conference Monday because our mayor's too big of a coward to do it. And it never happened. Matter of fact, he got on TV and was bashing us.
You want to say his name out loud right quick?
Yeah. What's the mayor's name?
Not the mayor.
Greg Fisher.
Well, I thought you were talking.
David James is the city council president.
David James.
Okay, gotcha.
So two fucking cunts there, huh?
Yeah. It was. I mean, I've never seen so much cowardice in my life that went on during this whole thing. And our chief, nice guy to talk to, but he was a wimp too. He's a coward, and he didn't run our department anyway. Our mayor's office has 100% control of our police department. The assistant mayor is the one that runs everything. We all know that. The chief is just nothing but a figurehead and a puppet. And it's a sad state of affairs, honestly.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up about the malice issue with the media, because there was a huge trial here a few weeks ago with Sarah Palin against the New York Times. And it was the same thing. They had admitted they were wrong, but they couldn't prove the malice part of it. Therefore, the case was tossed. And everything you're going through, there really is no recourse. You might get a mention on like page 27, a correction of like, oh, hey, remember that story we brought you 3 months ago? Sorry, we were wrong. In small print at the end of page 27, but nobody really gives a shit. They have their own story to tell and their own narrative to get out there. They don't care about you. They don't care about your family or what you're going through. It's just a fun narrative at the time that continued, through on the rest of the summer with everything else that happened. It's been extremely fascinating having you on the show. I had no idea who you were or too much about you before you came here. And it's like, to me, you'd be hard-pressed to listen to this interview and believe that there was, any maliciousness of you going into that house that night. You just seem like a normal dude, but it's the way that everybody else paints you that you come into some of these interviews with preconceived notions. And it's been lovely having you on the show today. Are you currently on a book tour? Is that why you're in Iowa?
I'm actually going to speak at a narcotics conference.
Is this pro or anti-narcotics?
It depends on if you're retired or not.
Yeah. Okay, because if you need Dan for anything, he's here.
I'm very pro-narcotics.
Depends on which narcotics you're talking about. See, I had my niece died of an overdose. She was given a little pill that she thought was a Xanax, and it was fentanyl.
Oh, fuck.
That's like...
Yeah, and she passed away. So, that, these low-level drugs, whatever. People do whatever you want. Put whatever you want in your body. I don't care. But when you're peddling stuff as one thing and it's costing lives, we had 100,000 overdose deaths last year. The hard drugs are what. Well,
you can't even fucking 10 years ago, cocaine was kind of a low-level drug for most people, but now, like, these West Point kids go to Florida for spring break, and they're all fucking in the hospital.
Yeah,
because it was laced.
Everybody, literally everybody I know that lives in major cities, Miami, New York, LA, they're always like, I don't do cocaine anymore.
No, why fentanyl?
Maybe that was the government.
Since we have a cop on the show, why fentanyl? You're just killing off your clientele. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, it's not your it's not your cartels and stuff that are losing money or care.
That's China.
It's the local dealers who don't know how to ration this stuff out. So, I mean, it takes 2 little grains, less than a gram to kill you.
Yeah.
And so what they're doing when they, we've seen several pill presses from people, and what they're doing is they're taking everyday house blenders, putting some fentanyl in with Benadryl, and they'll put Tylenol in there so it binds it, and they'll use different things and they'll blend them up. Well, I mean, we've all blended a shake, and you can see the inconsistency in it. So you might have 100 of the pills be normal or be not as potent, but then you've got some that settle different. The powder settles different in the blender, or settles different when they're pressing the pill. And that's the one. You might take 3 from the same guy, but that 4th one's going to kill you.
Shit.
And so fentanyl's super cheap to get. They can get it on the black market. They can order it online and get it from China. And it's just so much cheaper than heroin, easier to get. I don't know why they lace it with cocaine, because cocaine's an upper and fentanyl's a downer. It seems like it's kind of a negative effect. Then you're going to just be normal like the rest of us.
Now I just want to do some cocaine.
Yeah.
Just stick with Adderall.
Yeah, that's true,
Exactly. Well, now's the point in the show we get to the Drinkin' Bro of the Week, which is someone who has inspired you or helped you become the person you are today. Who would you like to give the Drinkin' Bro of the Week to?
Man, didn't see this one coming. Let's see. I'm going to go with, I'm going to give it to 2 guys, if that's okay.
Sure.
So when I first came on, I had a lieutenant and a sergeant, Lieutenant Joe Manning, Sergeant Chuck Tilford. And they were kind of a yin and yang. So Manning was the jujitsu tough guy that he was the boss that you were scared of. He didn't really have a great sense of humor that he let on. He was very, very serious, but he could kick your tail anytime that, snap of a finger, you were done. And then we had our sergeant, and he was just this laid back father figure guy who just, he was awesome. So those 2 together were the first 2 years of my career, which developed a lot of who I am as a police officer. I got from them, and those 2 guys just helped me see both sides and balance out the job. And so I would say them. Awesome.
Well, hey, man, we greatly appreciate you being here today. Sorry for everything you've gone through. I'm sure your life is upside down, and you're probably, figuring out how to put the pieces back together. Hopefully people will read this book and get a better understanding of that night. The book is called 12 Seconds in the Dark, a police officer's firsthand account of the Breonna Taylor raid. It is out now through the Daily Wire and available on Amazon. The reviews have been lights out so far. I don't know if you've read any of them, but they've been great so far.
Good. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for your time today. We greatly appreciate you being on the show. Check out his book. For D'Anthony Holloway, I'm Ross Patterson. We are the Drinkin' Bros podcast. Good night, everyone.